name is Rabbi Gidon Moskowitz. I'm the rabbi here of the Young Israel of Bell Harbor.
Okay, nice to meet you. Okay, so my first question would be, how would you describe the Jewish perspective on the meaning of the world and existence?
Wow, that's a heavy question. So what is the meaning of the world and existence?
Yes.
So the meaning of the world is to bring godliness into our world and to thereby bring the greatest joy to humanity. That humanity actually is searching. We're all searching for something. We're all looking for something bigger. We look to connect to things that are outside of ourselves, whether it's a sports team or a political brand or whatever it is. But the ultimate search is really for meaning, and Judaism provides that meaning, and it allows us to connect to something, the biggest something outside ourselves, which is God Himself.
The second question is, in Judaism, what are the core teachings that define the intent of the sacred in human life?
That define what?
The sacred in human life.
And human life. What are core teachings that define the sacred in human life? So, I think the core teaching is that man is made in God's image. So, man is different than a cow, or man is different than your cat, because a cat, while being perhaps cute and very lovable, is not made in God's image. Only a human is made in God's image, and because of that, human life is sacred. That's taught to us in the beginning of Genesis, that human life is sacred, and that's why slaughtering a cow for food is not a problem, but killing a human being is a very big problem.
Can you explain the significance of the Torah and other sacred texts in understanding the intent of the sacred?
The Torah is our text. That is the guidebook. In fact, the word Torah means instructions. It's instructions for living. And the longer name for the Torah is the Toras Chaim, instructions for living. And it is meant to give us a guidebook, a map, really, for our lives and what we do, how we interact with one another, how we interact with our Creator, and really how we discover ourselves.
How do Jewish religion's authorities interpret the concept of God's covenant with the Jewish people in relation to their destiny?
So, again, it's really, the Torah is that connection, that bris, that covenant between Hashem and the Jewish people. It started already by Abraham and the covenant between the pieces, when really our story began with Abraham. But it carries through to Sinai, where God appears to the Jewish people and makes a covenant with all of us. And then the covenant is repeated again on the foothills of entering the land of Israel, which would eventually be the land of Israel. At that time, it was the Canaanites who were living there. So, and that was 3,300 years ago. So there are different stages where God reaffirms that covenant with the Jewish people, but He states each and every time that it is a Brit Olam. It is a everlasting covenant where He's basically committing, not basically, but He is committing that we're in this for the long haul, and we, for our part, are doing the same.
What role does the concept of Tikkun
Olam?
Yes.
So that's a buzzword. Tikkun Olam means trying to make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm.
That is definitely a big part of Judaism. But whenever we do what we're supposed to do, as defined by the Torah, as defined by ancient writings that explain the Torah, such as the Talmud, we are being the takein, the olam. We are fixing the world by being better people. The fact that a person makes the right decisions and does the right things is something that we believe creates a positive, good energy. It actually brings goodness into the world. Besides for the immediate act that they're doing, which might be an act of giving somebody $50 and who needs some money, there's a goodness that enters the world in connection with that as well that has a much bigger ripple effect. So yes, that's called tikkun olam. But also when you pray with all your heart, that also is tikkun olam. And when you study the wisdom of the Torah, that's also bringing tikkun olam. All of those brings in an expansion of goodness in the world.
From a Jewish perspective, how do commandments guide individuals in fulfilling their destiny?
They are at the core of that. That's in Jewish practice, we have 613 commandments that actually guide our lives. Many of them are not applicable in daily life. Some of them only exist in certain times and places, but all of them are meant to really instruct us on how to live, and that's part of what I said earlier, Torah's Chaim, that the Torah is instructions for life. In a most practical sense, it relates to those 613, but even the stories in the Torah also guide us of how to live, how to interact, how to be people with greater faithfulness to our Creator and kindness to one another.
Could you elaborate on the concept of chosenness and how does it relate to the destiny of Jewish people?
Sure. So it really goes back to Abraham, when God, chose Abraham. But the truth is that before God chose Abraham, Abraham chose God. He was living in a world surrounded by pagans, and the pagan lifestyle was the furthest thing from anything that was moral or ethical. And Abraham stood in that very dark world and started spreading light. And he created a following. It's clear in the verses he created a following. He had a whole entourage, and he also taught that to the next generation, to Isaac, and ultimately to Jacob and Jacob's children. So yes, that becomes chosen in the sense of having this special relationship with God, which is sometimes, if you read the Torah says that because the relationship is forever, there are positive outcomes and there could be consequences as well of being that chosen nation. So we're not chosen for a free trip to Bermuda. Chosen means you're chosen for responsibility. And part of that responsibility is tikkun olam that you mentioned earlier, bringing goodness into the world. But it's a responsibility. It's not like optional. So yes, at the end of the day, there's a chosenness, but chosenness is not. It means chosen for responsibility.
Can you discuss the role of a prayer and rituals in helping Jews connect with the sacred and find meaning in life?
So we pray daily, in fact, 3 times a day, and on certain days it's even more. The prayer is opportunity for a person to connect to their Maker, to kind of take a step back and realize, just like we eat 3 times a day, so our soul needs to get that connection 3 times a day, and we provide that through the prayers, where we kind of, it's cathartic, but it's also very empowering, because we realize that as limited as we are in terms of what we can do, God is limitless, and if we can connect to Him, anything can happen.
How does the Jewish belief in the afterlife influence the way that Jewish people approach their earthly existence and their ultimate destiny?
So, very much so. If not for an afterlife, we'd have a lot of questions. Like, there are a lot of good people who die young, and bad people who seem to have a very good life, But we're only seeing a very small piece of the iceberg, because we're seeing, 80 years, 90 years, but compare that to eternity, it's not even mathematically equivalent. So this is just the launching pad, just as a child in its mother's womb goes through a transition where it leaves that world and enters a new world, but that's not a tragedy. That's part of its progression. It's moving into a new world. So too, in a sense, we'll leave this world and be birthed into another world, another existence, and that existence is forever. And yes, that's a core belief in Judaism.
How do Jewish traditions and customs such as Shabbat and holidays contribute to understanding the world's purpose?
So Shabbat reminds us every week that God created the world, because the Saturday is when He stopped. Shabbat is when He desisted. In fact, that's the word, what the word means. So he desisted on that day, and for us as well, we mimic that. So each week we go through our daily routine and our weekly routine, but when we get to Shabbat, we take a step back and we appreciate at the end of the day that it's God's world, and He created the world, runs the world, and by keeping Shabbat, it's a weekly reminder of those basic core tenets.
In light of historical experiences of the Jewish people, how does Judaism address questions of suffering and theodicy?
So, in light of what? What was the first part of the question?
In light of historical experiences.
Yeah, so Jews have had a lot of suffering historically. We've been exiled from our land not once but twice, and continue to come back. Exile is not pretty. It involves many people being slaughtered, and many Jews being slaughtered. And then in the lands of our dispersion, whether it was in Europe or elsewhere, Russia, there was constant pogrom, and Jewish communities would be attacked regularly. Historically, Jews would be exiled from their host countries regularly, simply for being Jewish, and for being different. So it's part of the Jewish story. It's even built into our liturgy that we recognize that there are ups and downs in Jewish history, and there's a lot of beautiful, happy moments, but there's a lot of painful moments as well. And we, as a people, it colors our experience. It really, it's part and parcel of our history, our past, and it gives us greater insight into the present and the future. So we do believe that not just individually we're transitioning to something ultimately better, but the world is transitioning to something ultimately better, and we look forward to a day when violence will be a thing of the past, and everyone can really live with peace and prosperity. Sadly, we're clearly not there, but recent events have shown that. But it's certainly our belief that the world will get there, even if it means you have to go through some rough patches to ultimately get there. But we'll get there eventually.
What is the relationship between Jewish ethics and the pursuit of a meaningful life?
They're one and the same. If you're living an ethical life by what the Torah teaches us, you will have a meaningful life. If you don't, then you won't. So it really, they go hand in glove. They're hand in hand. They're really one and the same.
And then my last question would be, how was the Jewish perspective on any of these topics evolved or adopted over time, and how would it remain relevant to the modern world?
I just want to say on the previous question, I mean, I'm really speaking from a Jewish perspective. For a Jew to live certainly we don't advocate that everyone has to live by the values and the dictates of the 613 mitzvot of the Torah. The Torah does have universal values for the world, but what I mentioned earlier about the 613 obligatory, so that's really for a Jew. But everybody has to live an ethical, moral life to find meaning and to be able to sleep at night, really, and to feel, not to walk around with an existential crisis every morning. What was the last question?
How has the Jewish perspective on any of these topics evolved or adopted over time, and how does it remain relevant to the modern world?
What's amazing, really, about these Jewish perspectives is that they're contained in the Torah, which is a document that we received over 3,300 years ago, but it remains as relevant as the day it was given. Certainly, there's a fleshing out. There's a conversation that happens in later Jewish works, whether it's the Talmud or the Medrash or various commentators on the Torah itself, and there's literally thousands of such works over the 3,000 years. But they really all come back to the Torah itself. They're not going a different way than the Torah. They're just branches that come off that same basic root. So it remains as relevant as it did the day it was given.
Well, thank you.
Sure, my
Thank you
pleasure.
so
You guys
much.